Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. There may be other people coming in, but this is our first panel together for a debut graphic novel, so we weren't expecting droves just yet, but we'll get there. My name's Mark Siegel. This is Xanthe Bouma, Boya Sun, and Matt Rockefeller, and we'll each introduce ourselves a little bit. Five Worlds is the first of 5 books in a series from Random House, and we'll be signing after this presentation at Autographing Area 9. So this is an unusual project, and we're going to tell you about the making of it, which I think is an interesting story in itself. Each book is 250 pages, so we're talking about a story. The overall story arc is 1,250 pages. So it's a big story we've set out to tell. And has anyone here read it already? One, all right.
Yay.
Okay, so it's going to be a little weird. You're going to get. We have like a little slideshow that opens up like how we work together. There's actually a 5th person, which is my brother Alexis. He's in London, so he's not here with us. I live in New York. Now these 3 are all West Coast. So Xanthe is in LA, Boya is in San Francisco, and Matt is in Portland. And we've found ways to work together, which I think you'll find interesting. And you'll see some of the making of. Then at the end, we have this little short movie with some time lapses of pages actually being made, which is fun. But then also the very first exclusive glimpses of book 2. First book is The Sand Warrior. The second one is The Cobalt Prince. So with that, I guess we'll launch in. I should tell you, I have published some books, some picture books, a couple of graphic novels, including an adult one called Sailor Twain and the Mermaid in the Hudson. I also run a publishing house called First Second Books, which is part of Macmillan, and we do a lot of really, really good graphic novels for all different ages. And then I went after these 3 to join this project, and they weren't even out of art school. But maybe you can each introduce yourself a little, and we'll take it from there.
Hi, I'm Xanthe. I'm a Southern California-based artist. I've worked in games, and I've done some like freelance work for animation. And I have a children's book coming out next year in 2018 called Little Sid. And most of my time is dedicated to 5 Worlds, so that's sort of like the most exciting project that I'm working on right now.
Okay. Hi, I'm Boya, and I'm also a freelance illustrator. I went to MICA with Xanthe and Matt, and I have a book coming out called Chasmonites with First Second. So
I'm Matt. I'm also a freelance illustrator. I also have a picture book coming out next year called Pop, and I spend a lot of my time doing book covers for middle grade and some animation stuff too. But we all met at MICA, and we started in our character design class, where we all met for the first time, and after that we kind of just learned how to collaborate, which was really cool.
Yeah, and MICA, if you're not aware of that school, it's Maryland Institute College of Art, right?
Yep.
And that they're dominating, they're kind of invading comics. There's some really, really good people that have started coming out of that school, and now there's plenty more coming. But Sam Bosma, you might have heard of, who worked on the Steven Universe backgrounds and fantasy sports, and Noelle Stevenson, who did Nimona. Some amazing people have come out, including these 3 here, which... so maybe I'll dive into the storyline, and then you guys jump in. Also, you're welcome to come closer. You don't have to. If you feel shy, you can stay way in the back row. But interrupt us, okay? This can be a conversation if you want to say stuff or ask stuff. You're here. Someday you'll say, I was at the first 5 Worlds panel, and there were only 10 people in the audience. So we've got
11.
This project, I'll just jump in and tell you. Oh, Okay, that's our book cover. And so originally, I was on my own filling notebooks with sketches, and I do a lot of watercolor and pen stuff, and I do that anywhere, like on the train. And these, if you see some of these early sketches, the characters back then were adult, and it was going to be an adult project. And I filled several notebooks, so there's hundreds and hundreds of these pictures and studies, and it was basically an early exploration. And I knew there would be several worlds involved, but this was a number of years ago. Then a little later, I started working and speaking with my brother, Alexis, who's not here, but we started talking. He works for the UN. He's a translator at the UN, so he has always been interested in world affairs and politics and different cultures colliding or cooperating. And so one night, he and I and a bottle of wine were in the backyard talking when he still lived in New York, and we ended up spending almost the whole night talking, because we started imagining what 5 worlds could be like and what kind of dynamics could be going on between different cultures. And in the course of it, there were these 3 characters that I had designed. You see them in the upper right, early versions of our main heroes, Una Lee, Jax Amboy, and Ansu. Those kind of appeared and kept returning in the conversation. And they are these guys. That's the earliest version, where they actually looked sort of like they do now, kind of. So I had these character designs. They're preliminary. They were not meant to be final at all. And then we started fleshing out a story. And then we started really working in earnest, and that was also many months of process. And then later, I was going to draw this myself, and the scope of it kept mushrooming and getting bigger and bigger. And then I thought, okay, this has got to be a team project. And so I went to an author, an artist that I knew, and he happened to be teaching at MICA. He couldn't join the project, but he said, you know what, there's these amazing kids that you need to meet. And there was the MoCA Arts Festival in New York, in Manhattan, and I met 2 out of these 3.
Yeah, we actually, he was introduced to Xanthe and I at first, and then I went to meet Mark at MoCA, and he was like, we definitely need a 3rd artist to complete our 5-person team for 5 worlds. And I was like, oh, hey, Boya's here. Let me go get him. And I did, and then our team was solidified then.
Yeah. And this, I should say, this collaboration is like no other collaboration I've experienced. And I've worked in a number of different ways, in picture books, in graphic novels, and I've had, a number of different teammates, but this is a totally different thing. And you'll see why when you see how we work. It's pretty exciting. So this was before the book started. There was quite a lot of world building that had been going on, and these kind of Photoshop attempts at like describing the worlds. And then, okay, well that's the team. So that's my brother, and he didn't just pose in front of Big Ben. He actually works, like the UN offices are right across from Big Ben on the Thames. So that's him at work. And then Matt and Xanthe and Boya. I really like these photos. So we started out, this is like scripting sessions. There was a big whiteboard with a lot of scripting, a lot of design work, like designing the sigils and flags of the worlds and the cultures. And what you see on the right is the scripting. And then once we had a working script, we then went to this team. And actually before that, I can't remember what it was like at the very beginning, but we had something. We did a sample for a pitch before we sold it to a publishing house. So we basically launched into character design. So this is sketchbooks from Matt's. These are Matt's, mostly Matt. No, there's actually some Xanthe.
On the left, and then Xanthe's
on the
right.
The expression.
you want to say anything about the character designs?
So when we first started, we were looking at Mark's little watercolor doodles he'd been doing in his sketchbook. And we kind of just used those as a foundation to kind of get a feel for each of the cultures of the different worlds. And then we kind of just cut loose then and just all took all of our different takes, what different directions we could go. And each of us has a different style that we like to draw in, and we kind of just kept it to our own style at this point and just tried to explore as much as we could.
Yeah, and we were also inspired by each other's drawings. So, like, if I saw Matt's drawing and I was like, that's pretty cool, and so I would do my own version. And that's how a lot of our characters evolved.
Yeah, things would start to build and change. Like, I know, Xanthe, you did, like, that first drawing of the 3 main characters. And then we just kept iterating off of that until we got to where we were.
Yeah.
There's also, like, since there are such a plethora of cultures, like, across all 5 of the worlds, we weren't really restricted by, like, a single aesthetic, because we were exploring different people who would dress differently, live under different conditions that you'll discover as we travel to the different worlds in the story. So it was sort of fun because we weren't stuck in, like, oh, everyone dresses, like, formally, or everyone dresses in, like, bulky sweaters. Instead, it was, like, we got to explore people who, you know, dress really extravagantly, and people who are maybe, like, poorer, and, like, through those visuals, we got to, like, expand the universe, like, a lot more too.
And we started to we'd start to look at a little thumbnail drawing of a character and be like, oh, that's a Toki person.
Yeah, yeah.
Or,
Wait,
oh, this
let me go
fits
back
with
to the
Cell
worlds
Sun.
for a second. So, just a quick introduction for those of you who haven't read it. Whoops.
Bye.
Okay, so the one on the bottom right is where we begin in book 1, and that's called Mondomani. It's the mother planet, and it's the old world. It's a bit like Europe is to America. It's like where, you know, basically the colonizing started. Then there's Toki, which is going to be the main world in book 2, which is a whole different mood, and that's the blue world. Then there's Salasandra on the bottom left, which is called the Mystic's Moon, and that has tons and tons of different religions and different cultures, and they're all kind of combined together. Grimboe up at the top is a moss world. It's actually an ocean planet, but the ocean is covered by this moss, and it's not just any moss. It's like a predatory, dangerous moss. And then Munyata is the superpower, and that's the young colony that basically overcame its mother planet and became the dominant force in the 5 worlds. And they each have, like Xanthe was saying, there's different ecologies, different light, different color palettes. Okay. So back to our sketchbooks. So there's actually, these are just like tiny selections. And in the course of the character design and the early world design, I started to see the different strengths in each of these 3 artists. And that, you'll see, we'll come back to that, it's really interesting. Do you want to say anything about the expressions, the sand dancing?
Yeah, we did do a little bit of work in the beginning because much of what Una does in the story, our main character, she's a dancer. And she might not be the greatest dancer, but she still does it and she enjoys it. And so we did some exploring because sand dancing is really pivotal to the storyline.
Here's some dancing.
Yeah, so we did some exploring of like what their dancing could be like because it wouldn't necessarily be anything earthen, and we didn't necessarily want it to equate it to something like ballet, which is very graceful, but we still wanted it to be like expressive and such. So much of like the early sketches that I was doing were sort of like gestural drawings of Una to kind of try to find out what the dancing looked like in this world, or at least this version of the dance. And that was also sort of being translated into like expression because like I think Una tends to have more gentle and also blunt expressions, whereas some of the other characters are more stoic. Some of them tend to be more exaggerated in the expressions that they make. So I was doing some exploring of that and like the faces and how each of them would react to certain types of things.
Yeah. So these are actually Xanthe's drawings, which is like a particular style that you'll see sometimes. In fact, if you come for the signing, you can each get some limited edition postcards of these pictures of the main characters. And in fact, the first person in line will get this t-shirt. 5 Worlds t-shirt. How about that? We can do the giveaway. Okay, so that's Ansu. This is Jax Amboy. Those are our 3 major characters. So once we knew them, once we were actually into the scripting, then we were starting to work into actual pages. And the way we did that, and you'll see a little more in our little movie at the end. Oh no, sorry, more background. Okay, Matt, do you want to talk about the different worlds a little bit?
So one of my strengths is to do the actual world building, the landscapes, and what each of the world feels like. And I was really inspired by each of the descriptions that Mark had given of the different worlds. And so I just started going into each one and trying to decide, okay, how does this blue world look? How does the predatory moss world look? And at this point, I was just going with whatever came to mind at first.
But we knew there were elements that were in the descriptions because they were part of the stories, So we knew on Toki, on Mondomani, where the story begins, we start in this school of this sand dancing, and it's a sand castle, giant sand castle. On Toki, on the blue world, it's a flying fortress. And then there's these cityscapes that belong to different worlds, and these are, if you see the actual sketchbooks, I don't know how well you can see on the screen, but they're just really, really beautiful.
I think the next.
The other cool part about Matt's landscapes and sort of his world design was like none of these sketches would be an isolated exploration. So like if Matt drew a location like this, then that would sort of directly influence if we did sketches later of like character designs for just like people in the background. Because then we were seeing the places that they actually lived. So, like if he drew these rocky landscapes and it's like, well, it would make sense that like the people here would wear like, boots or like really strong shoes or something like that.
Yeah.
So like we didn't just work on these like separately. It was very much cyclical, and we were like passing it around and taking influence from each other and the developments that we were making.
And we have these secret or private Pinterest boards where we have landscapes, and we have like mossy landscapes, and arid desert landscapes, and old buildings, and it's really it's kind of an exciting. There's a lot of research that goes in behind everyone. And that's the sand. These are early designs for the sandcastle. What was very cool was when I started this project. I kind of thought like Alexis and I were going to be boss, and we would just kind of bring in some artists, and they would be like guns for hire. And really quickly, what happened is we realized we had partners, and these 3 were they were creating this with us, and it was very, very exciting right at the beginning.
Yeah, and I was taking a lot of little notes in the margins, trying to think about how things were working, and then I would bring that back to one of our Skype meetings, and then it would eventually play into how Mark and Alexis were thinking about how the story was working.
Yeah.
A good example of that is when we were discussing the sandstone. Una has this stone that she carries around that unwinds, and that's how she releases the sand so that she can dance with it. And I think in Xanthe's first character design, she had like a glass bottle that had the sand in it. And then we came up with this other design it was more of like this kind of bulky, like
it was almost
pouch,
like a bag.
purse.
Yeah, it was almost like a purse. Yeah. Well, you'll see it a little later.
But then Boya and I were talking about it, and we came up with the idea that the sandstone could be the sand itself, but in a different state. So the sand could be hardened into a stone, and then when she wants to dance with it, it kind of unfurls.
Yeah.
And that kind of, once we came up with that, it kind of solved some story issues that Mark was having.
Yeah. So what happened was in the drawing, in the sketchbooks, they worked on this sandstone idea, and then that became a really key piece of the story and of Una's character. So this is how it evolved. We basically we're starting to have a 5-way dialogue inside these worlds.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it was also like functional. Like for example, at the beginning, it would be like in a glass bottle, but then we were like but she like runs around all the time. So what if
Yeah.
what if it breaks? And then like the beacon too. At first it was like hidden in the sandcastle, but then we were like, how do people see it?
Well,
Or
yeah,
how
because
did she
they
light
keep
it?
talking. They kept talking about it, the beacon in the story, and then it was like, oh, well, it definitely needs to be clearly visible in the scene, so that when they're talking about it, you can make that connection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a whole ancient past to these worlds, and so these are some sketches exploring some of the remains of a previous civilization, which is going to play into our story. Okay, so there you can see that little bulky purse on the side of Una's hip there. That was an early version of the sandstone. It became a much smaller little object. These were early designs for characters in book 1. And then they kept refining. And if you haven't read book 1 yet, you'll meet some of these characters. So one of the interesting things, like these are sketches from Boya for the technologies. Is there another one? I think there's another slide as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's 3 different technologies at play, and Boya kind of really got inspired, I think, with the design and the technologies. There's like you want to talk about that, or?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it's interesting, like the 3 different types of technology, and how they reflect like the world they're from. Like the more clunky one you see on the top left is from Toki, where I mean it reflects that their I guess society is a little bit more low tech, and then you see the higher tech, the rounder ships. It was really fun to draw
Yeah,
them.
and those 3, there's like the dirty technology. There's a clean technology that has a big flaw in it, which is the one that looks like a toy there on the right.
Yeah, I like toys.
And then the one on the top is a mysterious organic technology. It's a more living ship, which we don't know very much about that technology until much later. So what happened is that as we were going, well, you'll see. So this is what happens from the script. So my brother and I script, and we're working on Google Drive a lot. So what happens, there's times when I'm like in the middle of the night working on a scene, and then suddenly I see a paragraph of dialogue appearing right above my typing, because he happens to be working at the same time. So we've been working, and all of us work on Google Drive a lot. So I'm always updating our layout with like new pages that have been inked or colored. So this is what we call the thumbnail stage. I take the script and I just lay it out on one side of the page, and then I'm doing a very rough thumbnail and figuring out like a preliminary staging for the scenes. So you see, this is an example of a page, the way it looked in my thumbnail. It's pretty hard to read sometimes, but it's working out some basic staging issues.
So Mark would give us the thumbnails in batches for the story in about 50-page chunks. And then the 3 of us would get on a Skype call, and we'd talk about the thumbnails and then decide who would be best to do the sketch for that page. Because in a more traditional comic setup, we'd have one person doing all of the sketches, but we actually divide them between the 3 of us.
Yeah, so you know how in Marvel and DC model comics, they have an assembly line, right? And a lot of people have kind of carried on in that way, which is like, writer, penciler, inker, colorist, letterer. And we don't actually work that way. So if you see our pencils, and we'll have examples actually a few slides away, you'll see they split up the scenes from my thumbnails, and each one takes a little section. So if you read our pencils, if you read the book at pencil stage, you'll see the characters and the style of drawing evolve, like it just changes from scene to scene. And it's a beautiful thing. I think it's actually a wonderful thing, because sometimes that fixed model makes things kind of wooden and not very lifelike. And these characters, they actually float a little bit on model, which is an unusual thing, and I think it actually works for us. So this is a pencil. This is a pencil stage, and I think that might have been a.
That's Matt.
That was me.
That's
was
Matt.
Matt.
And then this one is also. And then what happens is Matt comes in and inks everything. So everything gets pulled together, and it feels like one voice. But the scenes, what we discovered early on was the natures of each of these artists. Really, that was one of the things that amazed me about this team project, was Matt has this kind of visionary imagination for, he can put you in a place and make it very, very convincing. Boya has this, like what you saw with the ships, for example, like Boya has a mind that it kind of problem-solving mind that artistically.
And it's also very playful. Like, I think Boya is one of the most playful out of the three of us in the design ideas. Like, especially with the ships and stuff, a lot of them feel very toy-like.
Yeah.
And charming.
Yeah. And then Xanthe does many things, including the key color design, but the thing I've felt with Xanthe is the emotion, and she'll draw a face, or a posture. I know I'm speaking with you, third person, but it's like you kind of feel so much from one of Xanthe's drawings, one of the faces, poses. So when you put those three strengths together and then they choose different scenes accordingly, it's an amazing thing. The result. I mean, hopefully the book speaks for itself, and you'll see.
I think the three of us too have sort of like, while we play off of our strengths, we've also kind of learned from each other's strengths, because there's a lot of things that I think in our personal work that we've begun to kind of adopt a little bit from each other. Not so much that it's become like homogenous, but I think at this point in Five Worlds, we found like a very fluid way of working where we don't have to worry so much about like our styles being very different. And I can kind of see that, like us like pulling that into each other's work. Like I feel like maybe like Matt's people have become more expressive, or like, because I make all the characters dramatic. So like maybe like Boya feels more comfortable making characters act really dramatically, and then I feel a little bit bolder like exploring backgrounds and stuff like that.
Yeah,
So
it's
we
not to
influence each
pigeonhole
other.
you, definitely, No,
But we still play off our strengths for certain scenes, just because it I think gives it a lot of life.
But then since we do kind of stick to we want to divide it evenly between us so that we each pencil about a third of the book, there are instances where we take on challenges because there's something that, for example, Xanthe might be better served for, but then there's a scene that I do that wouldn't be in my comfort zone normally, but then I grow from that.
So so you can see the ink. It's a little hard to see, right? Can you make out details over there? Not too well. So the ink also includes a first pass of grays, a kind of initial shading. And then this is key color. You can see there's still the little palettes on the side sometimes. And then cleanup color. And then the layout. And you'll see in the little video, the layout stage, it's actually going on all along. So in my InDesign file, I have the pages going from pencil, and every so often, I hit update, and it's like it updates to an ink, then it updates to a color. It's a pretty marvelous thing. So this, there you go, a Xanthe pencil. You see what I mean about the faces? Like I feel like I look at those faces, and immediately, like something in the middle here kind of melts a little.
Thanks, Mark.
And then here, is this a Boya? This is a Boya.
That's mine.
That's Matt.
It's Matt. I always think this one's So there's a sport in the book called Starball. And then this one is
That's me.
that's Boya. So you can see they have different natures, but it's actually, it pushes, it's like any artist has a blind spot and things they avoid and stuff like that. So we have three different blind spots, and they're kind of compensating and working with each other, and it's like it's quite an alchemy.
And this spread is a good example because Boya did the pencils for the left side, and then I did the pencils for the right side, because it was more of like the exposition of the landscape and the scenery for the right side.
Yeah.
So there are times where we split things up specifically.
Yeah.
Like
Oops.
that.
So you'll see, I think I have these pages in color. Right, so these are the final pages from some of the sketches you've seen. So it's quite a layered thing when you think 250 pages of this. It's layered. It's layered with many hours of work.
Many efforts.
There you go. That's the one we saw before.
It's also a lot of fun because the way that we break up these pages, we were sort of saying like each of us will do a scene, but oftentimes we're not just doing a full scene where we're like, okay, you take this first chunk, you do the second chunk, you do the third chunk, but rather it'll be like I'll do a spread, then Matt will do 2 spreads, then Boya will do a spread, and then I'll do another one. So it's very much interspersed. And occasionally I might do like 5 spreads in a row, just because that's like what the situation calls for. But it's kind of exciting because I think it really helps us keep track of where the characters are and what they're doing, because we have to make sure that there's a fluidity from page to page, even though 2 people will be working on 2 spreads that go together, but separately. So I think that's been something that we've improved upon a lot, but also has helped us with a lot of this visual storytelling, is like keeping track of everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, so that's the slideshow. So I think, are there any questions? Like everybody's been super quiet here. We're like in this little. Oh, good.
Okay.
So you mentioned all 3 of you split the duties in terms of the penciling, but did I hear right that only one person did the inks?
Yeah, I do the inks.
So you go back and do like all 250 pages.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
I think Nancy, you did the color keys, right?
Yeah, I do the color keys, and then Boya and I work on it together, like the finals of it.
So do you guys do it by like, I mean, because that seems like it's basically like every 20 pages there's a new key, or are you doing keys for like every?
I do it for every page. Yeah.
And what goes into, there's just a lot of thought that goes into every aspect. So the colors, as you can imagine, there's 5 different worlds. So there's 5 different kinds of light, 5 different palettes. In some cases, many different, realms that we visit on each planet have different conditions. There's also 3 suns in this picture. So we have some very weird issues of like night and day and stuff like that comes into it. And I mean, this kind of stuff, it's great, like I'll get a text message sometimes like at 11 p.m. or something, and there's like, Xanthe's going like, so, what would they wear on Salisandra's, like in the temple, it's like we're constantly solving problems.
Is there another question?
Yes.
Will the books be on sale at the signing?
How does that work? They're on sale at the signing, yeah, at Autograph Area 9, yeah. And they're out everywhere. They came out. Yes. The lady in orange.
Do you know of any other team of people that works this way? Because it seems like such a unique. It's as if you're triplets that like connected with each other.
I don't.
I know there are a lot of comic teams that all have their own unique way of working, but I don't know of any specifically that does what we do.
Yeah, no, I don't.
Well, it helps that we are friends, so
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that was a big benefit.
yeah, because like we trust, like we admire each other's art, and we trust that we'll do a good job, I guess. And it's sort of like, I guess, taking like in terms of like being like, oh, I own this piece of art, or like I feel like we don't really hold that too tightly. So like having Matt ink over my sketches is like exciting, and I really I don't know, enjoy that process. So I don't know if like say if people didn't know each other as well, like maybe they wouldn't trust somebody else ink over their sketches as
Yeah,
much.
like if
I
we
don't
had been 3 strangers that had all gone to different schools and come from different places, the collaboration might have been different.
know.
Yeah. I mean, we do get questions about like ego issues, and I think one of the magic things is like when you feel like the commitment to the project makes the project itself our boss, so we're actually all kind of answering to like, what does it need? Which sounds idealistic, but when it actually is working, it's a magic thing. Like I don't think we've had there haven't really been any clashes. You know, it's like sometimes we disagree about how to solve a problem, and we work it out. We always do. We find a way. Like
And then it's better after that.
it's always
Yeah,
better.
it always ends up better.
Any others? Yes.
So, was the selling of the book any easier because you run first, second, which is an amazing publisher by itself?
Thank you. Thank you.
Did that make the road somewhat easier, or do you have to just be like another person trying to sell a book?
I mean, it's a pretty crowded marketplace, you know. And when you're launching, I mean, in a way, the advantage and the disadvantage of launching a series is you get like we all agreed early on. We were like, okay, we're going for a slow burn here. You know, we were joking. We were like, if we have 10 people in the room for this panel, we're good. You know, it's because we're actually going for a long game. And the people that are drawn to this project, like we have all these conversations happening with the animation studios, and they get it. They see that it's like we're building this massive. It's a massive story. So it's not easy. It's never easy. I don't think anybody has a leg up on actually launching a book, any kind of book. But then you know, I mean, look at the amount of stuff that's being produced at Comic-Con. So we're in a crowded marketplace, but we also like there's a really interesting response, and the people that are drawn to our story are interesting people to us. You know, we have our influences. The people that inspire us are people like Ursula K. Le Guin, you know, Star Wars, Avatar: Last Airbender, Korra, Steven Universe, you know, some manga authors. And some of the people that are finding their way to this book are also responding to those influences. Okay, we're out of time, so I want to play this short movie. We can talk over the movie because you'll see you haven't seen this one.
No.
Okay. Is it working? Okay, so that's us Skyping. There's Alexis up top there, and we sometimes have really, really long Skype calls.
I was like, I just finished inking a page, and then everyone was like,
Yeah, while we were Skyping. So that's Alexis and me on Google Docs. So, you know, I'll be there typing, and suddenly I see that he's actually typing on the line above me, which is really cool. I know it's not super exciting to look at a Google Docs on your screen. Okay, so that's thumbnailing. So you can see I've got the script, and this is sped up. These are time lapses, so it's not actually, we don't actually work as fast as you're going to see here. But so quick thumbnail. And thumbnail, I find is it looks like nothing much, and there's a lot of thinking. It's like you're solving a lot of problems. I find it tough on my brain. Like I can only do about 3-4 pages at a time. So there's Boya working away. So you'll see the there we go.
That's actually what's happening on the screen.
Yeah.
So you can do you want to say anything about what it's like working? Don't you wish it was that fast?
Yeah.
It is really helpful to have Mark do the thumbnails beforehand. He definitely doesn't have to. And sometimes we'll change them a lot.
Oh, a lot,
But
yeah.
it's really nice to have them as like an anchoring point, just to at least sort of understand what he and Alexis are envisioning, because while he mentioned we are more partners in the storytelling rather than like people who just work for Alexis and Mark, we also want to stay true to what they're envisioning. So having his thumbnails as an anchoring point is really wonderful.
It really is.
Yep.
It's super helpful.
Yeah, so I also sketch really roughly compared to Matt and Xanthe. So sometimes I go
You
over
have to
it.
speak closer to the mic.
Yeah, sometimes I go over it, and Matt also makes a lot of adjustments. I don't know. Is
Yeah.
it fun?
There's times when
It's penciling.
we're doing a scene and the background isn't completely set in stone,
Yeah.
but they give like a general sense of the space, and then the background is kind of more defined when I do the inks, and it becomes more consistent in that step because I'm at a point where I kind of know where like doors are and where windows are and stuff. Little logistic things like that.
Yeah, and I feel like I don't have to make the sketches too tight because I know that Matt we can just do it. I don't know.
I mean, that's also, I think that's a lot of your playfulness, though, is like comes from like the looseness
I think that
of your
helps
work.
me a
It's
lot.
yeah, because it helps us stay loose also.
Yeah,
I think.
because I think
so.
Okay.
I think my drawings tend to be a bit stiffer than Boya's, so it helps.
Yeah, we can say
so
that.
there you can see Boya's pencil was actually in the background. It was grayed out, and then Matt is inking. And you can see you can adjust stuff in layers. And
Yep.
Balloons.
It's hard work.
Yeah, first is all the word balloons. So you're getting, this is a little glimpse, and you're going to see the end of the movie is the first exclusive glimpse at book 2, which comes out next year.
Yeah,
and
this
you'll
is-
see some actual pages, which this is from book 2.
Mm-hmm.
That's the plan, is a book a
Yeah.
year every May.
And 5 books total, 1 for each world.
Yeah.
So much to write.
Yeah.
I mean, if we could go this fast, we could probably do 2 a year.
Maybe more.
More, yeah.
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 We do a big chunk of visual development before we even start to kind of explore the world that that book focuses on, and the characters and the landscapes and any vehicles or anything we need, which kind of helps. It helps the process to go faster, but then sometimes there's things where we don't have a design for a character, and we're just like, quick, do a sketch of this
Yeah.
character. Or like, Xanthe, could you sketch this character and like what you were thinking for it? And then we just like put it into the scene.
Art,
Maybe
we have a
someday.
zine.
We have a concept art zine that we sold
Yeah.
at Mocha, but
Eventually.
Thanks. There's a minute
maybe.
left, okay, on the video. So these are key colors, and then you're going to see. So this is Xanthe doing key color, then Boya doing cleanup color, and then you'll see it appear in my InDesign layout, and where I put comments, I'll add in color cleanups. So in book 2, you actually get we have some flashbacks where you learn more about Una's childhood and her sister. So you can see cleanup is, sometimes cleanup involves a lot of detail work, like very careful detail work.
sorry, I draw so many lines, Boya.
And that's the layout
okay.
notes. So then I'll keep posting on the drive, and then as soon as they appear, I leave my comments like up there. A little comment about something working, or adjust this balloon.
He compliments us a lot in the margins. It's not all notes. It's mostly like
mostly-
amazing. It's very helpful.
Yeah.
And here's to end out our presentation, some pages from book 2. All right. Well, thanks everybody. Thanks so much
Thank
for
you.
this
Thank you so
panel.
much.